brooms are patient, the curtains heavy, the books hand-stitched and fading into a mellow tobacco colour. The silver speaks in a low register when touched, old polish settling into the creases, the way a memory returns to a familiar chair. The air is trained. It does not tumble or rush. It proceeds in measured steps. Voices in such rooms do not chase attention. They move as if on carpet that has learned restraint, and the sentences are lacquered, reflective, meant to reveal little and imply much. At tables where knives gleam softly, the appetite is never the subject, and where fortunes breathe through the floorboards, money practically evaporates from the tongue. The atmosphere is still because stillness is a shield. Someone once taught the house to keep a secret, and it obeyed. In these rooms, conversation is a kind of fencing, elegant and controlled, and the first rule is that no one bleeds in public. The cadence is light, almost inconsequential, yet it carries a load like a barge beneath calm water. The weather, the garden, a book from a century when sentences were built to last, a painter whose canvases do not call for applause, an opera revival that reminds one of a family funeral in Vienna, a horse with impeccable breeding that will never be discussed in terms of price, only temperament. The pleasures are curated, the vocabulary polished, smooth from long circulation. Silence is a currency. Gossip is an amateur sport, and amateurs do not belong here. If you wish to learn what is not said, listen to what is substituted. The subjects that are avoided form a negative space that defines the portrait. Money, for instance, is elided by a choreography of euphemism. No one speaks of returns, only of stewardship. No one speaks of net worth, only of obligations. The words taste a little like church, and that is by design. They turn naked advantage into a kind of duty, and duty is permitted at the table where power sits upright. The rules are not written, since writing invites discovery, and discovery invites questions. The rules are taught by watching the eyes of the matriarch when a guest strays, by feeling the temperature drop when a cousin mentions a deal, by learning to throw a silk shawl of wit over the body of a subject until it falls asleep. Old money learned these rules in self-defense. A fortune that intends to last must cultivate a style that prevents the usual enemies from gathering. Envy grows when it is fed with detail, so detail is starved. Insecure men want numbers, so they receive illusion. Strivers want lessons, so they receive stories with soft edges that blur the path between cause and effect. The mind is guided away from the vault and toward the hedgerow. Power is safest when it is almost boring. This is not modesty, it is strategy in satin gloves. Consider the way the old Dutch regent class turned understatement into a civic art. Their portraits show faces that refuse to give away a single coin of emotion. Black cloth swallowing light, lace precise but less important than the sobriety that frames it. They built canals and counting houses, and then they taught themselves to speak as if the water and trade were natural conditions. Like weather, to this day, families descended from those merchants keep a conversational plainness that looks like humility and acts like camouflage. Talk of profit is a provincial habit. The patrician registers a change of season, never a change of balance sheet. If you needed to ask the difference, you were not invited to the winter luncheon. Or look to the old Quaker families of Philadelphia who built banks and railways, yet maintained a discipline of plain speech that was both ethical system and social tactic. They avoided compliments that were too bright, avoided gossip that served no one, avoided the clatter of self-advertisement. Their silence protected conscience and capital at once. They would not brag because bragging cheapened the thing owned. They would not speak of price because price invited competition. The habit of restraint formed a fortress higher than any wall. In a world that rewards noise, they chose to cultivate signal. Etiquette is the enforcement arm of these decisions. Old world manuals never say it so plainly, yet the instruction is clear. At table, one does not speak of money or illness, because both disrupt appetite and remind the company of mortality. Politics is permitted only when abstract, never when it identifies a faction that could be seated across the salt. Sex exists only as scandal in footnotes of long-dead dukes, told with a half-smile that suggests other readers knew it already. The rule is not prudery. The rule is that certain subjects take up too much room, and rooms with lineage have a measured capacity. There is no shouting fire in a crowded theatre, and there is no shouting grievance in a crowded drawing room. Psychology explains the rest. Status thrives on ambiguity, because ambiguity forces the listener to infer, and inference flatters. The more you ask from another person's imagination, the more they invest in your myth. High-status conversation therefore floats above particulars, offering signs rather than disclosures. A house becomes a place in the country. A jet becomes a nuisance of scheduling. A painting becomes a family thing that must be insured. There is a comfort in this fog, not only for those who own the objects, but for those within the circle who prefer not to have their faces pressed against the glass of exact sums. Ambiguity keeps the peace. There is a financial architecture behind the conversational one. Multi-generational capital depends on instruments that are designed to be invisible at dinner. Trusts remove ownership to preserve control. Foundations civilize power by laundering it through beneficence. Family companies wrap the engine of wealth in a narrative about continuity. The more complex the structure, the simpler the language around it. He is a trustee. She is devoted to the museum. They are involved with a portfolio of farms that have always been there. The mechanism hums in another room. If someone reaches for the door, the butler appears with a new topic on a tray. Among aristocratic families in Middle Europa, there remains a habit of referencing history as a way to change the subject. Discussion of land yields to discussion of stewardship of forests, which yields to a mention of a forebear who served an emperor, which leads, almost without friction, to a talk about the restoration of an abbey's roof beams. The chain is deliberate. It moves the listener from ownership to obligation, from today's profit to yesterday's architecture. When a topic heats the blood, history is poured over it like cool water. By the time the anecdote is finished, the original question has no oxygen. Health is another subject that evaporates inside the old code. Illness belongs to doctors, and to private rooms, not to supper. One does not press aches into the bread plate of the person beside them, nor does one court pity, since pity can warp alliances. In brittler households, this rule is a cruelty. In sturdier ones, it is a kindness that refuses to let pain become a social currency. Privacy safeguards the spirit the way a trust safeguards a painting. There is an echo between the systems, because both were built to prevent sudden liquidation. Charity is mentioned as duty, never as applause. The conversation will touch lightly on a hospital wing, the way a moth touches glass. Names on plaques are accidents of architecture. The real work is pastoral and undescribed. If a family has maintained a pattern of giving for generations, it will have learned the art of almost never speaking of it, partly because true benevolence does not ask for clapping, partly because the habit of understatement avoids the vulgarity of self-congratulation, but partly too because publicity attracts pleas which attract judgments, and old money is allergic to both. The anonymity clause in a gift is the philanthropic cousin of the closed mouth at lunch. Another avoidance lies in the realm of ambition. To declare a grand plan is to admit that one is still climbing. The old families do not announce a desire to expand. They merely discover themselves in possession of a new vineyard, or their children quietly chair an arts board that conveniently alters zoning pressures near certain parcels. The language is passive because the result is a foregone conclusion. Psychologically, it steals the thrill from rivals. Strategically, it lowers the drawbridge only after the castle has absorbed the land around it. Observe how code words police the border. Someone may ask about business, and the reply will be that things are steady, which could mean a year of spectacular growth. Another might ask about a London flat, and the answer will be that it is adequate, which could mean high ceilings with elaborate plasterwork and a balcony hanging over a private garden square. These words are not lies. They are keys with teeth shaved down, meant to open only one door, the one that leads to continued membership in the conversation. A person who insists on detail marks themselves as an unreliable steward of the room. The room notices and forgets them. There are taboos that appear modern, but are very old. One does not dissect a friend who is not present, because absence increases vulnerability. One does not explain a connection that appears advantageous, because the explanation invites a ledger, and ledgers invite audit. One does not count children's successes in public, because fortune has a long memory, and children are slow to forgive adults who wagered their reputations in a casual boast. Restraint is not only taste, it is insurance. Yet there is warmth in these rooms when the code is understood. The conversation is not cold, it is temperate. There is delight in the right anecdote, joy in a poem recalled at the exact stroke of a pause, amusement when someone tells a story whose true subject everyone understands and no one names. In this warmth there is safety. The rules let people relax because they know where not to tread. It is not freedom, as the street imagines it. It is a curated liberty that protects affections from the hard light of inquiry. There are, of course, penalties. The code can suffocate the person who needs air, the child who wishes to say exactly how it felt to be sent away to a place with stone corridors, the spouse who wants to speak about loss without metaphor. Old money expects emotions to dress for dinner. Those who cannot tailor their feelings find themselves seated at the end of the table, smiling with their mouth only, an exile at home. But even this has a logic. The code privileges the continuity of the group over the drama of the moment. A family can absorb a silent grief. It cannot easily repair a public scandal. When outsiders enter, the test begins at once. The uninitiated will praise, will catalogue, will orient the talk to themselves as if the room were a mirror. Old money watches how often the newcomer names a brand, how precisely they hang a price in mid-air, how swiftly they request stories that smell like accounts. Conversation reveals character in a minute. The guest who asks instead about the garden soil, or the engraving on a dusty bookplate, or the painter's habit of scraping pigment back to the ground, is invited to the next dinner. Curiosity about texture is taken as proof of self-command. All of this may seem like theatre, and in a sense it is, though the drama is subtle. The old code was made to keep power smooth, to move it from hand to hand without bruises, to store it in families without clatter, to protect it from envy and from the recklessness of public interest. Such power prefers thought to feeling, process to spectacle, generations to quarters. It is neither noble nor ignoble. It is simply the most efficient way to pass a delicate object through time. So the rules of conversation are, really, the rules of conservation. Conserve dignity by avoiding topics that strip it. Conserve alliances by steering around subjects that crack porcelain. Conserve the appetite for one another by keeping the table free of the heaviest cargo. Conserve the fortune by refusing to narrate it. And conserve the illusion that no one is trying, because the appearance of effort is the one vulgarity the old world cannot endure. If you walk out from such a house into the evening, the street noise will seem untrained, raw, almost generous in its disclosures. It will talk about prices and injuries and politics as if they were amusements. It will call things by their proper names and feel honest for doing so. The old house behind you will look dark, its windows steady, the language within operating like a watch with jewelled bearings. Neither world is true, or both are, depending on where you are invited to sit. But you will carry away a sensation that is hard to shake, a feeling that conversation can be a kind of architecture, and that in certain architectures the load-bearing walls are the things never said. Perhaps that is the final rule. Good taste is a gate with a soft hinge. Power does not announce itself. It edits. It edits until the outline is clean, until every subject that would call attention to means or wounds has been removed, until only the long shape of continuity remains. People often mistake the quiet for emptiness. They do not know that the quiet is full of decisions, and they do not know that once you understand the code, you will hear it everywhere, in the pauses, in the ripples of laughter. In the elegant way, a question is answered with something beautiful and beside the point. Real legacy is not the weight of a name on a building. It is the mastery of silence that keeps a family's story from becoming a headline.